Hello and welcome to the Deviance World. I'm Dr. Eric Servini, and today I am thrilled to be speaking with Edafe Okporo, a New York-based author, teacher, and diversity expert. He's originally from Nigeria and now serves as the executive director of RDJ in New York City, the only shelter that provides housing exclusively for asylum seekers and refugees who are experiencing homelessness. He's also the author of Bed 26, a memoir of an African man's asylum in the United States. Edafe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
So you mentioned you're in New York City currently, but you grew up originally in Nigeria. Can you tell me a little bit about your experiences there and what brought you to New York?
Yeah, thank you very much. I came to New York when I was 26 years old. So the first years of my life was spent in Nigeria. I am from a family of four. I'm the last. I grew up in the southern part of Nigeria. It's like an oil producing area. But, growing up in Nigeria as a gay man is a very difficult experience. There's like persecution from family who wants me to get a girlfriend. There's church who wants me to be a pastor. There's like all this pressure on me. So I moved to Abuja, Nigeria. It's the capital. It's a metropolis. While I was living in Abuja, I discovered that there's an issue with like gay life in Nigeria. The rate of HIV among gay men was increasing because there was a law that was passed in 2014 that criminalizes same-sex relationship by 14 years imprisonment.
Wow.
So that law increased violence against gay men. That was like the time I became like an LGBTQ right activist. I was fighting for gay men to have access to healthcare services. That led to persecution, and that was why I left my country in 2016.
And so you mentioned that law was enacted in 2014. Could you tell me a little bit more about how that law came to be, and also, is the government actually prosecuting people for breaking that law, or who is it that's actually carrying out this persecution?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. Number one, the law came to be because of pressure of social, cultural issues. Africans believe that to be a man means that it's a gender construct of you will be the head of the household. And homosexuality, like two men staying together, threatening that masculinity of being an African man. So they were like, we are not going to accept this. But the reason why the law came into being is that it's the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act. That means it's not going to persecute you for being gay, but it's going to persecute you for marrying as a gay person, because people were coming from foreign countries with marriage certificates of like two gay couples. An ambassador from Sweden came to Nigeria with his husband, but their marriage is not being recognized. They don't give them visa. They don't give them things like that. So the government enacted the law to prevent such kind of provision. But when the law was passed of January of 2014, other things were added to the law, like cohabitation of same sex is prohibited, 10 years imprisonment. Organizations and activists that provide access to healthcare services for gay men will be persecuted, 10 years imprisonment. Amorphous show of public affection. I don't know what is that.
Yeah.
Like if two men are holding their hands on the street, they'll be persecuted by 10 years imprisonment. But the law itself has not persecuted people, but the law has given rights to non-state actors to persecute gay people. That means people who are not lawyers, not police, they can persecute gay people. Because if you are like, oh, if somebody attacked me once in 2014 and I said, I'm going to report, they're like, if you go and report, they will imprison you for being gay. So that your law has given rights to non-state actor to persecute gay people. But the government has not persecuted anybody. Currently, there's a case in file. In 2019, 57 gay men were arrested, suspected gay men were arrested in Lagos, Nigeria. They were doing like an underground party. And those people are the first people that are actually facing the law before court of law.
Mm. And before I ask about the persecution itself, one thing you mentioned are some of these underground parties. I'm so curious, as a historian and someone who researches, underground gay life in our own country, in the 50s and 60s and beyond. I'm curious, what does the underground gay world look like in Nigeria? Because one thing I was reading some of your interviews, and you mentioned that Nigeria has a ballroom scene. Is that
Yeah.
true?
Yeah. So, like, the gay community has found themselves together under one struggle, that's like HIV healthcare. Because when people test positive for HIV, that's when they get to meet other people that are also HIV positive, and they're like, oh, I'm gay. And they form like a support group for HIV positive gay men. So
Mm.
when I came to Abuja, I was pretty conservative. I don't want to have anything to do with out gay men or things like that. I have a master's in nutrition. I was working for a clinic. While I was working for a clinic, I saw the rate of HIV prevalence among gay men was 29.9%. And the
Wow.
reason why that prevalence was higher than general community, which is about 3.9, is because there is no education and there is no access for gay men. And how can we be able to provide access and education? It was through the ballroom scene. So a ballroom scene is like we rent an hotel room and send the location to only people that RSVP. So it's like secret. When
Yeah.
people come there, we have like 80 to 90 people. They bring their clothes, they bring their heels, they bring their wigs and makeup. They do makeup. We do drag show. And during the ballroom scene, we get to ask people, do you know what is HIV test? Have you tested for HIV? Do you know the difference between a water-based lubricant and an oil-based lubricant? So during that ballroom scene is the only opportunity we get to educate people and get people tested for HIV. So the underground ballroom scene is like so much tied to the world of HIV healthcare access for gay men in Nigeria.
Wow. And you see that all throughout history in the United States as well. In the 60s, there was a organization called the Society for Individual Rights, which made, a novel invention of using specifically balls, using social events as an opportunity to recruit people into a movement. And it's so interesting to see how important community and social activity can be in not just education but also activism. Um,
Yeah.
eh,
So I just want to make reference to when I said that the first people that are facing persecution, the 57 suspected gay men, it was a crackdown of a ballroom scene in Nigeria.
wow. And so, in going a bit deeper in that persecution itself, I know you experienced quite a bit of it. So I'm wondering if you could share what happened and what actually prompted you to leave for America.
So I've suffered a lot of persecution. Like it's all started when I was like 12 years old. I went through conversion therapy. So like traditional conversion therapy, they will take you to like a voodoo doctor, try to do some concussions
Huh.
and like cure the gay from you. It didn't work. When I was like 16, I did the church religious traditional conversion therapy where they try to pray the gay away. it's like it's like the black gay experience is going through the pray the gay away phase. So at that point, I became a pastor. I thought I wasn't going to be gay anymore. So because I was hiding, I tried to meet somebody on a gay dating app. And this person pretended like he was gay, talked to me about being top, bottom, things like that.
Mm,
I don't know anything. I was like, okay, fine, I'm going to see this guy and
mm,
maybe have sex for the first time with a gay guy.
mm.
When I went there, he welcomed me into his apartment. Suddenly, I saw guys coming from the closet. There were three other guys there. They held me on hostage, beat me up, took my phone, my wallet, went to the bank, took money from me, pushed me out naked,
Oh
and
my
they said
God.
I should run and don't look back. I can't report this to anybody because of the criminalization of homosexuality. But worst of all happened when I was working in Abuja, providing access to healthcare services for gay men. I was attacked in my apartment. They dragged me out, beat me up, stripped me naked, and they were doing the walk of shame. The walk of shame is they'll tie bell on your waist and your feet. They will be singing, sweeping your feet like they're cleansing the community from homosexuality. And I was living in a Muslim-dominated community. I was so lucky. By Sharia law, I was supposed to be killed by those people. But while they were beating me up, I blacked out. And when I woke up, I found myself in a clinic I was working. I don't know how I got there. That was when I said, if I wanted to leave, it wouldn't be in Nigeria. I went to the UAE. I couldn't seek asylum in Dubai. Came back to Nigeria. I was in hiding. I got a visa to attend the Vitry Institute LGBTQ Leadership Fellowship in DC. I was supposed to come in December, but because of my advocacy, I won an award by AVAC as a grassroots HIV and AIDS organizer in Nigeria. That award put my life more at risk, persecution, so I had to flee. The only thing I had with me was just like my bets, just few things I had. I bought a plane ticket, traveled to Cairo. From Cairo, I wanted to go to Europe, but because of language barrier, I chose to come to America. When I came to JFK, I don't have any family or friends here, so I asked for asylum at the border.
Wow. So how does that, I don't think many Americans know what that process looks like. So when you arrived at JFK airport and you go to an immigration officer and you say what? And then what happens?
So I didn't know what was asylum. I said to the immigration officer that I'm fleeing my country because my life is in danger. They are pasting posters of me on the wall saying that I should be brought down dead or alive. And the immigration officer said that, oh, you're an asylum seeker. We'll take you to a room and a border patrol officer will come and interview you. After about 4 hours, a border patrol officer came, interviewed me and said, okay, you have a credible fear of persecution. Then you move into the next phase. The next phase is I will be taken to a jail. That's a detention center. So when I got to the detention center, after some few days, I was interviewed again by an asylum officer, which determined that my case is credible enough because I have past persecution well documented, present persecution, and future persecution. If I return back to my country, I'll be persecuted because of the law. So they move you to an immigration judge. So the immigration judge is where you ask for asylum. They will give you the asylum documentation. You look for a lawyer, file for asylum. And because I was detained, I can't have access to the document. So my lawyer took the record of my interview and went to corroborate it with evidence, calling my family, calling my employers, school, things like that, to prove that everything I said was true. After my lawyer appropriately document my life, went on Grindr, download my profiles, all the gay dating app I use and things like that, chatted with friends, sent support letters, the judge determined that I can't return to my country because my life is in danger and granted me a refugee status to stay in America as a refugee.
Wow. And this was in 2016, right?
So I came in 2016, not until 2017, 5 months and 14 days before the judge granted me protection.
So does that mean you were in that detention center, in that jail for 5 months?
5 months and 14 days.
And that was during, or at least part of it was during the Obama administration. So I'm assuming things have not gotten better. Is that correct?
I came in 6 days before the presidential election. One thing I want to say is this, not to be on one side or the other. During Obama administration, we had more deportation than the Trump administration.
Really?
Yes. So in the Trump administration, what the Trump administration have done is that they have shut the access to protection, but they delay the deportation of people. They keep them in detention centers and gain money from people sleeping in the detention centers, close access to immigration. But during the Obama administration, people could come, but they deport people. A lot of people were deported.
So more people are in limbo now, just being held in these detention facilities.
Yeah, so the average wait time in detention center during the Trump administration is 18 months. That means someone will stay 1 year and 6 months. because the detention center have a mandate. Under the Obama administration was 30 beds. Now it's 45,000 beds must be filled each day in America. That means people must be in detention centers so that they could make profit. If they don't, those beds, the government will still pay for them. Most of the detention centers is run by two groups, GEO and Star Group. That is, one of them is the Cause Civic of America. They trade under the stock market. So if someone is trading under the stock market, they need to make profit. So for example, they detain somebody $201 per day, the federal government pay times 45,000 people all spread across America.
So that math is quite a bit of money, and from what I understand, the owners or the leaders of these companies have ties to the current administration. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when the election was between Hillary and Trump, Hillary does not like private prisons. The detention I was in used to be CCA, Correctional Corps of America. They changed their name to Cause Civic of America because if Hillary Clinton had won, she would have shut down most of those private prisons. Under the Trump administration, there have been expansion of private prison, especially children detention centers.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm from Texas, so I know quite a few of them are down there at the southern border. And so that brings up the RDJ Refugee Shelter, which you are the executive director of. Could you talk a little bit about how you discovered them and also how what you do now with them?
So when I came to America, when I was released from the detention center, I was homeless. From being homeless, I found my way. I started working with Hyacinth AIDS Foundation in New Jersey because I had experience with USAID and HIV work. But being an LGBTQ activist is not as important of a work as an immigrant rights activist for me right now, because LGBTQ people have gained a tremendous amount of equality in America compared to LGBTQ immigrants. So I wanted to do work that will affect the most marginalized in our community, which are LGBTQ immigrants. So when I came to become the director of RDJ, I was just a one staff person. Now we have four staffs. Wow. And I think our fundraising target then was 90,000. Now we are over 500,000 is our fundraising target this year. One thing we do that is different from every other organization in New York City is that no organization have competency to care for LGBTQ migrants. When a migrant is released from the detention center, they don't have a place to go. For a refugee to be resettled, they need an address, physical address in America. And, if a refugee is resettled, within 90 days, the resettlement agency certify them as self-sufficient. So how do they move from one place to another? We're just bringing people here to move them into a poverty lifestyle. So what I try to do is to provide holistic care, looking at my experience of being homeless to where I am now, to provide that kind of care for other people. So when asylum seekers come from Russia, Uganda, Lebanon, and they're seeking asylum based on their sexual orientation, we provide them a place to live. We look for legal resources because I have access to all these legal firms like Immigration Equality, Legal Aid Society. Then we also look for social services. If they are from Iran, we look for like an Iranian group. Caribbean, we look for like a Caribbean group or an African group so they can connect with what we call community under the social care services. And when they are ready to move into their first apartment, we look for either low-cost housing, affordable housing, or put 2 or 3 people under a 2-bedroom apartment and pay for their first deposit so that they can be able to continue their life here in America.
Wow. Well, on behalf of our entire community, thank you for the work that you're doing. I mean, because especially as you mentioned, we have made such great strides, especially with the Supreme Court decision this past month. And, anytime I get on my soapbox, I say, we're forgetting about people. What about those who don't have the jobs in the first place, right? Or somewhere to live in the first place. And of course, I wasn't aware as much about the plight of LGBTQ plus asylum seekers, but certainly people experiencing homelessness in this country have long been disproportionately queer, simply because they're often the ones kicked out of their homes. And so,
Yes. So something I want to make big point about homelessness of LGBTQ asylum seekers is a very terrible condition for asylum seekers who are HIV negative. Because if you are HIV positive, there's housing for people living with HIV and AIDS in New York City. The system is built for you to be terrible to have access. Be HIV positive, be someone with mental health disorder, be someone within like very, very marginalized income bracket. You might be eligible for housing. But if you're an asylum seeker and you are HIV negative, you don't have social security. You don't qualify for any kind of support. So they ask you to do two things. They ask you to either get infected with HIV or become a sex worker or have sex with people to sleep on their couch. Transgender immigrants who come to this country who don't have social security, some of them become sex workers to have a place to sleep at night. It's a terrible situation for them because they cannot vote. And you know, politicians care more about their constituents that can vote. That is why when we talk about equality of LGBTQ people, we are forgetting the people that are banging on our doors and saying, we need your help. There was a time whereby HIV positive people could not come to America because there was a ban on HIV positive people to come here seeking visa. 2012, before the World AIDS Conference, that ban was lifted. There was a time gay people could not marry. 2015, Supreme Court passed the decision. Now, gay people can walk. As we progress to fight for love is love and equality of LGBTQ people, we would not achieve that entire equality until we look onto those members of our community that cannot get support, like you said in your book, that LGBTQ equality is both an economic issue as well as a social issue. LGBTQ immigrants is an economic issue and social issue, but they do not have the power to overturn those kind of stipulations that are mandated on top of them.
and I think if there's anything history teaches us, it's that those with the least to lose, whether it's people experiencing homelessness or trans women of color, they're the ones to fight for people who look like me, the cis white gay men. And also, as a result of their position within our community, also the first to be forgotten. And I think I'm just so grateful that after the successes that we've had in 2015 and 2020, that you are the one saying, who are we forgetting, and actually doing the hard work. And one of the things that raises is, especially last month, was Pride. And actually the way that we first connected was through the Reclaim Pride Coalition. So I'm curious how you first got involved with that, and if you could talk about what you've done with them.
So Reclaim Pride started as Rise and Resist. Rise and Resist was an organization that was founded after Trump won the election in 2016. Progressive activists in New York City that were part of ACT UP and Gays Against Gun came together and say, let's form an organization that can resist this new administration that want to cut like access to healthcare for trans people, housing for trans people, HIV treatment for global HIV access to treatment, immigration policies that are bigots, and Rise and Resist came as a group. So as Rise and Resist was a group, we were doing immigration rallies during the Trump Muslim ban, during like the purge in Chechnya and things like that. We discovered in 2018 that most people who want to come to Pride in 2019, World Pride from different parts of the world, cannot attend Pride because the NYC Pride have the band you have to wear, and they have each amount of registration for a float. So maybe you got your visa on June 15th and traveled to the US. They will tell you have to have been registered by February, or you came out on June 25th and Pride is June 29th. Can't match because you have to wear a band or you are registered under the umbrella of a big corporation. Secondly, corporations take front seats during the march in Pride, and we have to stand and watch these corporations march on the float. So we went to Heritage of Pride and say, okay, 2019 is going to be World Pride in New York City. People are going to be coming from different parts of the world. Why don't we create a pride march that will reflect the entire dynamics of the community and allow all of us to march without the police barricading us? HOP said no, that they won't do that. And we started resisting their meetings. We would go to their meetings, disrupt their meetings, go to their meetings, disrupt their meetings. And we're like, that strategy was not working. So why don't we create our own march? So we created Reclaim Pride March in 2019 so that we can create a march that all people can march freely without the corporate float and police. And that was what we did in 2019, which was successful. In 2020, we were planning the march on the piers to honor Marsha P. Johnson and every other person that has come before us. But, you know, the coronavirus came and we said we were not going to have the march. It was just going to be like 8 hours of visual events. But during the Black Lives Matters protest came up, we said it would be a fault on Queer's part not to stand for Black lives.
Yep.
So we created this march within 3 weeks, the Queer Liberation March for Black Lives Against Police Brutality. We wanted a march that there would be no speech, just like the People's March, the first Pride March that happened. Gay people marching through and reclaiming what pride really means, which is we celebrating our intersectionality, lifting the voices of the most marginalized in our community, and fighting every structure of oppression, be it corporation, NYPD, cisgender, white, homophobic people, just anybody that is trying to oppress the most marginalized in our community.
And your organization has been such an inspiration to me because it shows a path forward, right? Because as a historian, I'm looking backwards saying this is how it used to be and this is where we're at now. And it's quite depressing, frankly. But to see tens of thousands of people coming to march against police brutality and the oppression of all in the middle of a pandemic, organized in 3 weeks, that was essentially what the first Pride was. And so it's so beautiful to see that. And I hope that Heritage of Pride and Pride Inc. Incorporated stands aside, right? And I've been trying to tell people that what you organized is the original Pride.
Thank you very much. So I wouldn't take credit alone. It was a lot of work there.
Yes.
It was like 200 volunteers non-stop. If you see our email thread, you are going to go crazy. We have 30 people constructing art, 30 people on media, 30 people on marshals, 30 people on like refreshments. Like we have different people syncing together. I was the lead for like Black immigrants in America. We have the Black trans media. They were lead for Black trans people. We have Jay that was lead for Black people that are fighting against police brutality. We have John our Black activists in New York City came together and say, we need our white allies together. If you see, it's Queer March for Black Lives Against Police Brutality. It was 2 goals. 1, we're marching for Black lives. 2, we're marching for all queer people that have been treated unfairly by the police. Pride was as a result of the marginalization and policing of our identity. So when we are trying to dismantle this structure, we're dismantling the structure for all queer people and not just Black queer people.
And so that brings us to today. And one of the other reasons that brought us together, that connected us, was you brought to my knowledge, because I had no idea about this. And frankly, people are not talking about it. Could you tell us what the Trump administration is proposing and what is happening in the next week? And then we can talk about how to fight it.
So this is a very important issue. If not for asylum, I wouldn't be here sharing my story. LGBTQ people are 4% in the world statistically. That means all the thousands of asylum seekers that are coming here, A rough percentage of 200,000 of them each year are gay people that come here to seek asylum. And the Trump administration proposed a new asylum regulation that will define the word persecution. So there was a purge in Chechnya, we all remember. The Trump administration proposed rule is saying that stay in Chechnya and be killed before you will be defined as persecuted. Secondly, firm resettlement in another country. If you are being persecuted in Uganda, the cheapest flights, you will take 3 countries before you come here. The Trump administration is saying if you travel from Uganda to Colombia to Mexico and to Canada before you get here, you are barred from asylum because you have opportunity to seek asylum in Canada. Why come here? Thirdly, gender-based violence, gang violence, the bar for credible fear I made mention at the beginning will be increased to a point that almost nobody can be determined to have a credible fear of persecution. And they are giving the Border Patrol the right to deny you asylum before you see a judge. So that means at the airport, I said, I'm being persecuted because I'm gay. I don't believe you. Return back to your country. Without seeing a judge that is trained to handle that case. Then the last one is frivolous asylum application claim. Before, the law says that a frivolous application is when you knowingly put a false statement. Now the Trump administration is defining frivolous in a vague way that could be, I made a mistake in my application, is deemed frivolous, you have banned for life. It's just like saying if you commit DUI, you should never drive again in your life. So this law is about to go in effect on July 15th after the commenting section, but we could do something to slow that law from going through. Now the law is under the Federal Regulation Registry for people to submit comments, and is mandated that the DOH, the Department of Homeland Security, and DOJ, Department of Justice, both of them are working on this law together. But they have to review every single unique comment that is submitted under this speculation.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do is to load the database with millions of comments.
Wow.
Number one, to slow down the review process so that one of two things will happen. If the review process finally takes place and goes in before November, ACLU will challenge it. But if the review process goes beyond November and a new president is elected, by next year, the president can choose to throw it away and not implement it. The reason why we are raising awareness for this is because the Trump administration have tried to do this 3 times during major issues. In 2018, February, Jeff Sessions passed a law called Last In, First Out. So if you're an asylum seeker, you came in after this law was passed in February, you came in March. If you apply for asylum, within 3 weeks, your asylum will be granted. But those that apply for asylum before 2018, between 2017 to 2018, their cases might never be heard for the rest of their lives in America. That means they will be stuck in limbo almost for their entire life. You can't get out of America. You can't get a passport. You can't get green card. You're just stuck as an asylum seeker. Also, the Trump administration have also wiped out the possibility of seeking asylum based on domestic violence and gender-based violence. The reason why we are asking to slow this down is because they have come for LGBTQ people. Defining persecution means that membership of a particular social group which LGBTQ people qualify for and HIV positive people qualify for will be visually impossible. So gay asylum seekers from Russia, Uganda, transgender people from Honduras, people persecuted in Jamaica, Guyana, or the 7 countries that have the death penalty, including Saudi Arabia and Dubai, they can't come here and seek protection.
So, in other words, someone like you coming to America, fleeing gender based or queer related persecution, such as being the target of violence by mobs repeatedly, would not be allowed in our country and would be immediately deported.
I will be immediately, my case will not be heard because the definition of persecution have risen to a level that I did not suffer that level of persecution.
So, you mentioned a solution of how we can slow this down. So, where exactly should we go? And I'll make sure we have links for all our viewers and listeners. What exactly should we do, and how do we prevent this from happening?
So it's under the federal registry.
Okay.
So I will share, I think I shared the link with you. Also, on my blog, I wrote my story. If you want to personalize yours, you could use that personalization. Why it's important is that every unique comment, maybe there's a slight change in something, have to be read. So go there, personalize it, and says that queer immigrants, this law will prevent them from seeking persecution. And that is not what America stands for. So just even though it's 2 words you could write, make sure you put a comment. It's like signing a petition.
Yep.
More people that comment, the more it becomes impossible for them to go over all the comments.
Right. And it has to be unique also, right? So you can't just copy and paste. You have to make it your own words, even if it's just 1 or 2 words different, right?
Yeah. On our blog, I put a resource on www.rdgrefugieshelter.org/blog. You'll see a resource. On the resource, I put a template there. If you click the template, it will show you option to personalize it. I took it from immigrationjustice.u, something like that.
Okay.
They did a webinar too. In the webinar, they explain historically how asylum came to be with the first act by Congress in 1980 called the Refugee Act, and the different levels of asylum law that have changed in the past, and what it means for people who are seeking persecution to come to America to access protection. If this is taken away, we are saying that we don't care about our queer brothers and sisters who are coming to this country to seek protection, because a fight against one of us is a fight against all of us. And this is a fight against queer people.
Amen. And Edafe, thank you so much. We're running out of time, but you're also the author. I want to give a plug to your own book of Bed 26, a memoir of an African man's asylum in the United States, where you can get your full story. I had the chance to start it, and I cannot wait to finish it because it is phenomenal and so, so important to understand your story. But more importantly, thank you for educating me and everyone else about this issue. It shows just how much work we have to do. And so we'll make sure there are links to all those resources.
So I have a new book that is on pre-order. It will be out in October. It's called Compassion is Worth More. The reason why this book came out is because a lot of people have asked me, I stopped being an activist and I wanted to teach people how to use their civic power to create change. So if you are trying to understand what powers you have as a civilian, I think that book is right for you.
Amazing. I will put links to both, including as well the links to the Federal Register where we can submit our comments, slow this process down, prevent this from happening. But thank you so much for joining us, and let's do this. Let's prevent this tyranny from continuing and fight for those who fought for us and who are the most forgotten. Thank you so much, Edafe.
Eric, I want to say thank you to you, because I know it is overwhelming for a lot of white people now to feel like a lot is happening and they are not, like, they are feeling like everything is being put on them. I see your work online. and I see you do work to elevate the message of the community as in whole. So don't feel like we are doing things to protect people like you. People like you also are giving us platform to share our story, which is something I think you should be proud of. And I'm really grateful for you giving me the opportunity to have this conversation and to garner your audience to take action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining, for the kind words. See y'all later, everyone, and see you next week on The Deviance World.